didn't start with pain. It started with a whisper, a shaky spoon, a few seconds of slurred words, a moment of dizziness she brushed off as just age. 3 days later, Margaret Evans, 74, independent, still walking her dog every morning, found herself on the kitchen floor, unable to speak or move. The doctors called it a minor stroke, but there was nothing minor about what it stole: her confidence, her freedom, her peace. The truth? Her body had been warning her for days. She just didn't know how to listen. Today, I'm going to show you how to hear those warnings and how to stop a stroke before it stops you. It began like any other quiet morning in Cleveland. The sun had just started to pour through the blinds when Margaret Evans, 74, poured hot water over a tea bag and watched the steam rise. She had always been fiercely independent, still driving, still walking her golden retriever buddy every morning, still insisting she didn't need anyone's help. That morning, however, something felt different. The spoon rattled faintly against the cup. Her right hand trembled, not much, just enough to make her pause. She laughed softly to herself. "I probably didn't sleep well," she muttered, brushing it off. A few minutes later, as she reached for her phone, a strange emptiness filled her mouth. Words formed in her mind, but refused to leave her lips. The sound came out broken, like static. Then, silence. The teacup slipped. Porcelain shattered on the tile. Steam rose into the stillness of the kitchen as Margaret's body slumped to the floor. Her mind was awake, but her voice was gone. An hour later, her neighbor, Linda Carter, found her lying motionless beside the spilled tea. Margaret's eyes were open, frightened but conscious. At the hospital, doctors used a gentle phrase to describe what had happened: a minor stroke. But for Margaret, there was nothing minor about losing trust in her own body. When Dr. Howard Tucker, a veteran neurologist and longevity specialist, entered the room later that day, he immediately recognized the look in her eyes, that mixture of confusion and disbelief. He'd seen it many times before. Margaret could move again and speak slowly, though her voice trembled as she asked the question he had heard from so many seniors before her. "Doctor, why didn't I feel anything before it happened?" Dr. Tucker took a slow breath before answering. "You did, Margaret. You just didn't know what it meant." He explained that most strokes don't strike out of nowhere. The body warns us first. The warning signs are subtle, almost polite: a weak grip, a slurred word, a fleeting moment of dizziness that passes as quickly as it comes. For decades, Tucker had worked alongside Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara, a legendary Japanese physician who lived to 105. Hinohara often told him, "The body whispers before it screams." Tucker had never forgotten those words. What Margaret experienced before her stroke wasn't just aging. It was what doctors call a transient ischemic attack, or TIA, a mini-stroke. A TIA happens when blood flow to part of the brain is briefly blocked, then restored. The symptom fades, and that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. When the slurred speech or numbness disappears, most people assume the danger is gone. In truth, the clot has dissolved, but the cause remains: sticky blood, inflamed vessels, silent dehydration, or rising sugar levels. As Dr. P.T. Bucky, Tucker later explained to his students, a fading symptom isn't relief. It's a red flag. The brain just fired a warning shot. He knew from research that nearly 1 in 3 people who suffer a full stroke have experienced a TIA in the previous 90 days. And yet, most never report it. That's why awareness, not luck, determines who recovers and who doesn't. Margaret's story soon became one of Dr. Tucker's teaching examples. He would tell new patients, "When your body whispers, listen. Don't write it off as age. Don't wait for it to pass. Call your doctor. Get checked within 24 hours. That single day can change the rest of your life. Because the truth is simple and hopeful. The brain isn't betraying you. It's warning you, giving you a chance to act before the storm begins. 3 months after Margaret's stroke, Dr. Howard Tucker found himself in a small examination room with a new patient, John Peterson, 68, retired firefighter from Columbus, Ohio. John was the kind of man who looked younger than his years. He still volunteered at the firehouse twice a week, mowed his own lawn, and refused to let his daughter drive him anywhere. But today, his confidence was shaken. A week earlier, he had collapsed during a neighborhood walk. The diagnosis surprised him: ischemic stroke. What shocked him even more was what the nurse told him afterward. "Your blood pressure's normal, Mr. Peterson." John frowned. "Then how did this even happen? I've never had high blood pressure in my life." Dr. Tucker smiled gently. "That's what most people think, that blood pressure is the only villain. But stroke isn't just about pressure, John. It's about flow." He rolled his chair closer and drew a small diagram on a notepad, branching blood vessels leading to the brain. "Think of your vessels like garden hoses," he said. "Even if the pressure's fine, if the inside of that hose is coated with sludge, cholesterol, sugar crystals, inflammation, the water slows, clogs, and eventually stops." John leaned forward, intrigued. "So you're saying my pipes were dirty, not overworked?" "Exactly," Tucker replied. "The flow was compromised, not because of force, but friction." Over the years, Dr. Tucker had seen this pattern again and again. Seniors with textbook-perfect blood pressure readings suddenly facing a stroke. No red flags, no sky-high numbers. Just quiet turbulence inside the vessels that nobody saw coming. He recalled a landmark study from the Journal of Neurology that found nearly 1 in 4 ischemic strokes in seniors occurred with normal blood pressure. The real culprits were silent: chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, dehydration, and fluctuating blood sugar that damaged the delicate vessel walls. As he explained this to John, the older man's eyes widened. "You know, Doc, last week it was 92 degrees. I've been out mowing the yard, hadn't had water all day." "There it is," Tucker said softly. "When we're dehydrated, blood thickens. It moves slower. Add a bit of plaque, a bit of stress, and you have the perfect storm." Dr. Tucker often remembered what Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara had taught him decades earlier in Tokyo. The body doesn't fail in silence. It struggles in silence. That phrase echoed in his mind as he spoke to patients like John. Because while everyone obsessed over numbers, blood pressure, cholesterol, sugar, few paid attention to the texture of their blood. Healthy circulation isn't about keeping numbers low. It's about keeping movement smooth. Later, when John was discharged, Dr. Tucker gathered his notes and turned to his team. He wanted them to start focusing on what he called flow health, the invisible quality of blood that determined how it moved through aging arteries. "We can't just tell patients to lower their pressure," he told them. "We have to teach them how to nourish their circulation." He wrote the key pillars on the whiteboard. Hydration. Water keeps blood fluid and vessels flexible. Nutrition. Omega-3 fats, leafy greens, and antioxidants reduce vessel inflammation. Movement. Gentle activity, even a 10-minute walk after meals, improves blood flow. Calm. Stress hormones tighten arteries. A calm mind keeps vessels open. "A calm vessel rarely bursts," Tucker said. "That's something medicine often forgets." In the months that followed, John Peterson changed his habits. He started carrying a water bottle everywhere, traded his nightly whiskey for herbal tea, and added salmon and spinach to his weekly meals. 6 months later, his follow-up scan showed healthy, open vessels, and more importantly, no new stroke activity. When he shook Dr. Tucker's hand at the appointment, he grinned. Guess I learned it's not about fighting pressure, it's about keeping the current steady. Dr. Tucker smiled back. Exactly, John. Blood doesn't want perfection. It wants rhythm. That day, as he left his office, Dr. Tucker reflected on how many lives could be saved if people simply understood that truth. Stroke prevention isn't about control. It's about cooperation. The heart pumps, the vessels guide, and the brain listens. When that partnership stays in harmony, the current flows, and life keeps moving forward. 2 years after his stroke, John Peterson no longer feared the morning walks that once reminded him of fragility. He moved slower now, more deliberate, but with gratitude. Dr. Tucker often told him, "Progress isn't a finish line, John. It's a rhythm." That rhythm, slow, patient, and steady, became the heartbeat of Dr. Tucker's entire career. Because for decades, medicine had repeated a cruel myth. After 6 months, recovery stops. He'd heard it too many times. Doctors told patients that if they hadn't regained movement or speech within half a year, they probably never would. But in his 70 years of practice, Dr. Tucker had seen the opposite. The human brain, he believed, never truly stops healing. It just changes how it heals. One of his most memorable patients was Evelyn Brooks, an 80-year-old retired art teacher from Denver. 2 years after a moderate stroke, Evelyn still couldn't button her blouse with her right hand. Her physical therapist had declared her progress plateaued, but Dr. Tucker didn't believe in plateaus. When he entered her rehab room, Evelyn looked up with quiet frustration. "I can't even hold a paintbrush anymore," she said. "That part of me is gone." Dr. Tucker knelt beside her wheelchair, placed a small folded napkin on the table, and smiled. "Then let's start with this. Fold it, one edge to the other, slowly, every day." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Doctor, I don't see how that's going to help." "You don't need to see it," he replied. "You just need to feel it." Each day, Evelyn sat by her kitchen window, folding napkins while listening to her favorite jazz record. At first, her hand barely moved. The napkins fell from her grip again and again. But she refused to quit. Weeks passed. Then one morning, she noticed something small. Her thumb finally pressed against her forefinger. The napkin folded perfectly. Tears filled her eyes. She called her daughter, her voice trembling. "I just folded it. All by myself." When she returned to Dr. Tucker's office 6 weeks later, he wasn't surprised. He'd seen it before. "What you did," he told her, "wasn't magic. It was neuroplasticity." He explained that the brain can reassign tasks and build new pathways, even in your 70s, 80s, and beyond. The process doesn't stop after 6 months. It just becomes quieter, slower, subtler. Researchers from Harvard's Department of Neurology had confirmed it. Older adults could still form new synaptic connections when they engaged in purposeful, emotional, and repetitive movement. Dr. Tucker summarized it simply: the brain learns best when it cares. For Evelyn, folding napkins wasn't just an exercise. It was connection. The texture of fabric, the rhythm of music, the emotion of memory. Together, they activated her dormant circuits. That combination, emotion, purpose, repetition, became what Tucker called the triad of repair. He'd seen it in hundreds of cases. A grandfather regaining handwriting by journaling letters to his grandchildren. A pianist relearning finger control by playing lullabies for his wife. A gardener retraining her balance while planting tulips. Each act wasn't therapy, it was meaning reborn. And behind each movement, the neurons quietly rearranged themselves, building new bridges where old ones had broken. One evening, while reviewing his notes, Dr. Tucker thought about something Dr. Tucker Hinohara had once told him during a Tokyo conference decades earlier. "Howard, the brain is not a machine. It's a garden. Even soil that's been dry for years can bloom again. if someone bothers to water it. He smiled at the memory. That metaphor had carried him through every hopeless case he'd ever taken. He often shared it with his patients. Recovery doesn't stop. It just goes underground. The roots are still alive. Keep watering them. By the following spring, Evelyn Brooks returned to her old studio. The canvases waited, untouched, dusty. She picked up a paintbrush with her right hand, the hand that once refused to obey. It trembled at first, then steadied. A blue stroke appeared across the canvas, uneven, but hers. When she finished that first painting, she titled it Rewired. For Dr. Tucker, that word captured everything he wanted seniors to know. Healing doesn't expire. The brain doesn't give up. It adapts. Even years after a stroke, recovery isn't about what you've lost. It's about what your brain is still waiting to rediscover. The clinic was quiet that morning. A soft rain tapped against the windows as Dr. Howard Tucker poured a cup of green tea, a habit he had adopted from his late friend, Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara. He was preparing for a lecture titled The Art of Prevention. But before he began, he sat in silence for a moment, remembering Hinohara's words from their last meeting in Tokyo. Howard, the old doctor had said, age doesn't steal health, fear does. The more we fight time, the faster it wins. But if we learn to work with the body, time becomes an ally. Tucker had smiled back then, not realizing how deeply those words would shape the rest of his life's message. As the lecture began, he looked out at the audience, rows of older adults, caregivers, and medical students. He didn't start with charts or statistics. He started with a story. When my patient Margaret Evans had her first mini-stroke, she thought it was the end of her independence. When John Peterson came to me after his stroke, he thought it was bad luck. And when Evelyn Brooks told me she couldn't paint again, she thought her best days were behind her. They were all wrong, because prevention isn't about perfection. It's about partnership. He paused, letting the words settle. Dr. Tucker walked to the whiteboard and wrote 2 phrases: control and cooperation. Most of us are taught that prevention means control. Control your blood pressure. Control your diet. Control your cholesterol. But true prevention begins when you replace control with cooperation. When you listen, not just measure. He drew a simple diagram: a heart, a brain, and a set of arteries connecting them like a river. Aging doesn't dry up the river. It just slows the current. Our job isn't to fight the water. It's to keep it flowing smoothly. He spoke about the latest 2023 study from the Journal of the American Heart Association, showing that simple, rhythm-based habits, hydration, light movement, balanced sleep, and daily calm reduce the risk of recurrent stroke by over 50%, even in adults over 80. Then he wrote 4 words on the board: hydrate, move, rest, breathe. These are your daily negotiations with time, he said with a gentle smile, and your body will always meet you halfway. He went through them one by one. Hydrate. When we age, our thirst signal weakens. Dehydration thickens the blood, slows circulation, and stresses the brain. A simple glass of water every 2 hours is one of the most powerful medicines on earth. Move. You don't need a gym membership. Just move with rhythm. A 10-minute walk after lunch, gentle stretches before bed, or even slow dancing in your living room. Motion keeps the vessels flexible, the blood steady, the mind alert. Rest. He looked around the room. Sleep isn't laziness. It's vascular maintenance. During deep sleep, the brain clears inflammation and plaque. Less than 6 hours a night, nearly double stroke risk. So protect your sleep like your medicine cabinet. Breathe. When you're anxious, your arteries constrict. When you breathe slowly, they relax. Calm blood is healthy blood. A few minutes of deep breathing each day can lower blood pressure more effectively than some medications. He let the room grow still again. The blood vessels don't ask for perfection. They ask for rhythm. After the lecture, a woman in her 80s approached him. Her hands trembled slightly as she said, "Dr. Tucker, I've spent half my life afraid of growing old, but now it feels like my body and I are finally on the same team." He smiled. That's the whole secret. Age isn't an enemy, it's an instructor. That evening, as the rain cleared and light streamed through the clinic window, Dr. Tucker opened his old notebook from years ago, the one filled with notes from Dr. Hinohara. On the final page, written in fading ink, was a line he'd never shared publicly. The goal of aging is not to live forever, but to live wisely, to listen when the body speaks and answer before it cries. He closed the notebook and whispered, "Thank you, my friend." The next morning, he wrote a short note on his office board for his patients to read as they entered. Your body is still listening. So should you. And that simple reminder, in 7 quiet words, became his lifelong message. Because stroke prevention, he realized, wasn't about numbers, diets, or fear. It was about rhythm, partnership, peace. And when seniors learn to live in that rhythm, the brain, the heart, and the years ahead move together, not against each other. Not every scar shows up on a scan. Spring sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, the same window where, a year earlier, Margaret Evans had fallen to the floor beside her shattered teacup. Now, the same spot was filled with the smell of vanilla and cinnamon. Margaret stood at the counter, hands dusted with flour, teaching her granddaughter how to roll cookie dough. "Don't press too hard," she said softly. "Let the dough breathe." Her right hand still trembled a little, but she no longer feared the tremor. It was proof she was still here, still moving, still healing. When Dr. Howard Tucker arrived for a routine follow-up, he found her like that, apron on, music playing quietly in the background, sunlight tracing her silver hair. She turned, smiled, and said, "Doctor, I thought my story was over. Turns out, it was just a rewrite." Tucker couldn't help but grin. "That's my favorite kind of ending," he said. He watched her knead the dough, the same hand that once refused to move. Every slow, careful motion carried the weight of months of effort. The physical therapy, the journaling, the tears, the moments of doubt followed by small victories. Later, as they sat by the window, Margaret poured tea into 2 cups, one for herself, one for him. "You know," she said, "I used to think healing meant going back to how things were. But I'm learning it means moving forward differently." Tucker nodded. "Exactly. Recovery doesn't erase what happened. It rewrites how you live with it." He told her about the patients he'd met since. John Peterson with his steady walks, Evelyn Brooks painting again, George Whitman humming to Miles Davis. Different people, same thread of hope running through each story. When Margaret asked how she could make sure this never happened again, Tucker smiled. "You already are. You're listening now." She looked puzzled. "Listening?" "Yes. Every time you drink water, take a walk, rest early, or breathe through stress, you're answering your body before it has to shout. That's prevention. That's partnership." He rose to leave, but paused at the door. "Margaret, may I share your story with my students?" She laughed. "Only if you tell them I bake better than I walk." They both laughed, an easy, full-bodied sound that filled the house with warmth. Outside, Tucker stopped for a moment, breathing in the spring air. The world seemed unusually quiet, the kind of stillness that feels alive. He thought about how many seniors he had met who lived trapped between fear of aging and disbelief in recovery. They had been told for decades that age meant decline, that healing had a deadline, that prevention belonged only to the young. But Margaret and the hundreds like her proved something different, that age is not an expiration date. It's a library, and every page holds lessons the body still remembers. Lessons about movement, rest, patience, and gratitude. That evening, back in his office, Dr. Tucker opened his notebook again, the same one that held Dr. Hinohara's old quote. He added a final note beneath it. The body whispers, the heart listens, the brain rewrites. Then he underlined one word, rewrite. Weeks later, one of his students, a young neurologist named Dr. Alyssa Mendez, stopped in after class. "Dr. Tucker," she said, "I used to think aging was about loss, but after hearing your patients' stories, I see it's about rhythm, like music that changes tempo but never stops playing." He smiled. "That's exactly what it is, Alyssa. The rhythm just slows, so you can finally hear the melody." Back in Cleveland, Margaret Evans continued her morning walks with Buddy. Sometimes her hands still shook when she poured tea, but she no longer saw weakness. She saw warning, awareness, life. Every step was steady, every breath deliberate. She no longer chased the past, she moved with it. As she often told her granddaughter now, "Your body is like a friend. It tells you what it needs if you care enough to listen." And so, the story that began with silence ended with sound. The laughter of a grandmother, the bark of a happy dog, and the quiet clink of two teacups touching gently together. Because in the end, prevention, healing, and longevity aren't about defying age. They're about learning the language of your own body and answering its whisper before it becomes a storm. If this story helped you see your health a little differently, don't let it stop here. Take a moment today to listen to your body. Drink some water. Take a walk. Breathe deeply. These are small choices, but they're how independence begins again, one day at a time. And if you want more science-backed health stories like this, for strength, longevity, and peace of mind, subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss what your body's trying to tell you next. Because the truth is simple. Your brain is still listening. The question is, are you?